Hello, and welcome to eCom Insights, the podcast where we give you data-led tips to optimize your profits online.
Hi, I'm Matt.
And I'm Rail.
And welcome to the very first episode of eCom Insights. And we're going to be digging into marketplace trends and looking at very data-led insights. So how are you, Rail?
I'm doing very well. Thanks, Matt. Excited to kick off this podcast series. It's been in the works for quite a while. Some fantastic topics, some fantastic guests. So really very keen to get stuck in. But before we do that, I think a brief intro is warranted. So Matt, who are you?
So I'm Matt Anderson. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at OptimizeOn. I've had a long journey through digital marketing over the last 20 odd years now. Prior to OptimizeOn, I ran a company called Marketplace Amp, we were acquired recently last September. I've been working in the world of e-commerce and Amazon for over 15 years now. So I started with Brabantia, optimizing their content across all of UK, EU and USA, and then basically realized at the time with my previous agency, Montage, that this is where it was at. From a marketeer's point of view, I was super excited to see the data-led insights and how the marketing changes that I'm making are influencing sales. I've always got a huge buzz off selling wherever that is, either in person and or online. And that's sort of like, it was a drug at that point. So I loving what we do. Snowballed with the likes of Sphera and Soap.com and all sorts of brands came out of that. And on the back of that traction, we launched Marketplace Amp about 5 years ago. And that's basically a part of my journey.
So everyone, I'm Rail Klein. I founded Nozzle. I definitely have fewer e-commerce years under my belt than you, Matt. But Nozzle is a Amazon tool provider, very much focused on customer-centric data and patterns. And what do I mean by that is basically like our belief is if you want to build a successful brand on Amazon, understanding customer behavior is a crucial part of that, regardless of what else you're doing. But Amazon's not very good at giving those type of data sets. So it's very SKU or ASIN centric, tons of data about price and units and all those sorts of things, but not really about customers, how many come back, how many times they're buying, how profitable a customer is over time, what they're buying together, cross-selling, upselling, all those sorts of things. So Nozzle is basically a dashboard that provides all that information, and crucially, how do you use that information to improve your business? So Nozzle was bought by OptimizeOn, so we've been part of the OptimizeOn family since September of last year. And it's obviously been a wild ride in the ever-changing e-com landscape. Looking to learn so much from this podcast from the fantastic guests.
Yeah, and we knew each other prior to OptimizeOn as well. Yeah. I have to say, one of the things I really do like about the e-commerce ecosystem and also Amazon is that people are very close. You can learn a lot of your peers and competitors as well. So I think I'm really looking forward to introducing some of those sort of luminaries from the e-commerce world onto our podcast because it's not all about us, is it, Real? I mean, I know they've got a nickname for us, by the way, listeners. It's the two Ronnies internally. Which I don't know whether I like that or not, but we'll see. We'll see if it sticks. But yeah, I mean, I think it's what other things are you looking forward to and to learn from?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I've been very narrowly focused, which is sort of what happens after that first order. I've been very focused on the Amazon universe. So for me, it's about expanding into all different types of channels and just looking at a much wider lens, right, around how people think about whether it's assortment, customer acquisition, and all the other sort of operational, organizational type things that it takes to run a scaled, successful e-commerce brand.
No one wants to listen to us for ongoing all the time, but I think it's important to sort of understand a little bit more about yourself and some of your background, just so our listeners can understand what kind of insights they can expect from you. I mean, how did you come about creating such an awesome tool like Nozzle? You've got an interesting background, so do tell.
Yeah, so I guess to understand Nozzle, probably need to go back to the previous company that I founded, a company called Media Gamma. So Media Gamma wasn't in e-commerce. It was actually in just online advertising. And online advertising, I guess for the last 15 years, quite a long time even, what happens is when you visit a website, it could be any website, there's a live auction to show a user an ad. And so in literally milliseconds, an auction's run, winner's chosen, winner's ad gets shown to the individual, literally billions of times every day across the world. And what we were focused on is writing custom algorithms to win these auctions. But how do you write a successful algorithm? Well, it's all about actually measuring what happens after the ad's shown. So it's not just about, does someone download my app? It's about the lifetime value. And so the most successful customers were always customers that were very, very focused about giving us the data. What is the 3-day lifetime value, the 10-day lifetime value? Are they spending money once they download? And once we have that signal, that information, we can go write far, far better algorithms. And so when I sold that business in 2020, for the last, I don't know, 3 or so months before that happened, I was very much looking into the Amazon universe, which at the time was investing quite a bit into the advertising APIs. And so we were looking to basically replicate this lifetime value versus customer acquisition cost playbook that we had done in sort of the open ad ecosystem, but apply it into the Amazon ecosystem. And as I said before at the top of this episode, where Amazon, it's not an area Amazon typically focus on, but if you're a D2C brand and something that clearly lends itself to repeat orders, this is very, very valuable information, and really one of the most important KPIs you would look at. And Amazon wasn't providing this, so that's kind of the genesis of how Nozzle came to be, really.
You mentioned value there, but why is it so valuable? Just for our listeners, so they can understand that.
Yeah. So when we talk about lifetime value of a customer, it's obviously worth just taking a step back and describing what we mean here. It's basically how valuable a customer is over time. So profit per customer is another way we would describe it. And so if Matt, you go buy something on day one, we would, and it's profit, right? So we would take out all the Amazon fees, or the cost of goods sold, or the landed cost. And so, like, what is the actual profit from that particular order? Clearly, if you're buying, 3 items or 3 different items, it's aggregating all of those things. But let's say you come back in 3 months and buy again, and we do the same calculation again. And so it's a cumulative total of how much you're worth to a particular brand over time. And we do this across the entire customer base. So if you've got 500,000 customers that have bought in the last 2 years, each one of those customers would have this progression of how valuable they are over time. And of course, we could sort of aggregate that and say, look on average, on the first order, a customer's worth, let's say, £20 to you. But if you wait 3 months, the average customer is now worth £30 to you, because some of those people are coming back and buying again. And that's kind of how we, I guess, define it or measure it. And why is it so useful? What's so valuable about it? Well, it answers quite a fundamental question, which is how much you can pay to acquire a new customer. And so, typically a lot of the Amazon universe has been quite focused on breaking even on that first order, right? So I know that, my profit on the first order is typically $10, and so you really want to make sure that you can break even on that first order. But this unlocks a very, very valuable strategy for brands that have high number of repeat orders. So typically we're talking categories like food and drink, or supplements, or pet products, or household cleaning, health and beauty. Anything that essentially leads itself to repeat orders. Does not have to be the same product, just anything else from the brand. But basically the playbook we would advocate is, okay, let's say, you could spend $10 to acquire a customer if you want to break even on that first order. Well, if you wait 3 months, it turns out you can now spend $17 or £17 or whatever the number is. And what that allows you to do is to be a lot more aggressive on your customer acquisition, because you can go after much higher cost per click terms, category terms that typically might have been out of reach. It allows you to invest higher up the funnel if you want to do sort of awareness type campaigns on the demand side platform, on the DSP, or videos and things like that. And just basically allows you to be more aggressive, knowing that you've got that comfort of knowing that, okay, I'm going to break even, let's say in 3 months or 6 months, whatever it is. The caveat to all of this, you've got to have the balance sheet. You've got to be able to fund it. The trade-off is you're not breaking even for 3 months. So, you've got to have enough cash to sustain that. But if you take the long-term view, then this pays off in spades, basically. So that's kind of the classic main use case for Nozzle and the main playbook there.
Okay, so just taking that rationale, because at time of recording we're coming up to Prime Day, by the way, listeners. So I think it's it's just a strategy point on all of our minds. Is that how can we use this data to inform strategy in Prime Day or indeed Black Friday in Q4?
Yeah, so I think before getting into the specifics of Black Friday and Prime Day, that's, how much time do we have? I've got lots to say about that. It's a
It's not the
complicated one,
podcast.
but generally speaking, what this allows to do as kind of a strategic view is to say, how much should I focus on retention versus new customer acquisition, right? So, when we look at the data, it might say that 60 or two-thirds of all sales are coming from repeat customers. So on the one hand, that's really good. That means you're probably very profitable. There's probably quite a lot of subscribe and save going on there. And that's great. But then there's always this question of, well, where does future growth come from? Right. So it might be good in the short term that this is very, very profitable, but there has to be some element of investing in future growth via new to brand acquisition. And so the key kind of question is, well, what's the right balance, right? It really depends on, are you in growth mode, are you in profitability mode? And not all ASINs are created equal. It might be that your hero ASINs are kind of mature and always going to be in profitability mode, and the others are more in growth mode. So it's really like, what is the right ratio between new to brand and repeats? We've definitely come across cases where they're over indexed on one or the other, meaning I've seen pet businesses where like 85, 90% of sales are from existing customers, which is really good in the short term, but you really have to think about the medium and long term on how to
How you
grow.
can grow that base, don't get complacent. Yeah.
And the flip side of that is I've certainly seen supplement businesses that are paying $30, $40, even north of that, to acquire a new customer, but their retention rates are not good. Their lifetime value doesn't grow. And so you're trying to constantly fill up a leaky bucket. And that is the wrong strategy, right? Like, our recommendation would be, you need to fix retention. You need to figure out why not enough people are coming back and buying again. And once you've done that, then, invest in new to brand acquisition, because this is, you're not going to be competitive in the medium to long term, where your competitors have got much higher retention rates and lifetime values, and so you're kind of investing in the wrong thing at the moment. So all of that brings me to your question, which is, how do you think about the big promo days like Black Friday and Prime Day? And it's complicated because, I mean, the short answer is we actually advise about a third of our customers not even to take part. And so why is it, right? And we would argue that most customers who are in the sort of core categories that Nozzle serves are measuring almost the wrong thing about Prime Day and Black Friday, which is, you're taking those 2 days and what does it mean for like sales or units? What does it mean for new to brand acquisition?
It's all about top line, isn't it? It's all
yeah,
about top
yeah. It's quite superficial, and it's not that I'm blaming the brands. It's actually Amazon just does a very poor job of giving you the data and insights of like the actual stuff you need to know.
The brands, though, that's Amazon's narrative is pushing.
Yes.
Look at the top line. Look at the top line.
Totally
look at this sale.
Yeah. So these are like superficial metrics. The way we think about it is, okay, you've actually got a number of pretty bad things happening on Prime Day for you. So number one, you're paying a lot more to acquire a new to brand customer because cost per clicks and CPMs and all that sort of stuff are typically much higher. Number two, the type of customer that you're acquiring are not so-called like good quality customers. So what I mean by that is a lot of them are deal hunting. So this shows up in very reduced retention rates 3-6 months down the line, and therefore very reduced lifetime values 3-6 months down the line. So to recap, you're off to a pretty bad start because you're paying a whole lot more to acquire a customer that is typically not nearly as valuable as your average customer anyway, right? And you get second order effects, things like actually your most valuable customers are buying in bulk on Prime Day on a discount where they probably would have bought at full price anyway, right? So if I'm buying bin bags or batteries or whatever it is, and it's typically always via Amazon, I'm just buying a whole lot of these things in bulk on Prime Day. So, you got all these things that are working against you. However, and this is the big caveat here, and this is why you need to crunch the numbers, there's kind of one thing that can more than cancel out all these bad effects. And that is, if you get enough new to brand customers through the door, you would happily trade off some retention and LTV in pure gross profit terms, right? So if I have 10x the number of new to brands, when you crunch the numbers, you would happily trade off, as I say, like some retention and LTV and maybe pay a bit more, as long as you're sort of breaking even still, and that cohort size is massive. There's just so many people that could work out, but it's not clear, right? We've crunched the numbers for loads and loads of brands across different categories. And it's very hard to generalize to say, like, typically, I don't know, in supplements it's this thing, or in pet products it's this other thing. There's no telling before you crunch the numbers where you're going to land on all of that. So it's kind of an individual thing, but that's why I think it's quite complicated. To know beforehand whether something like Black Friday or Prime Day would actually work for you.
Well, thanks for that. It's certainly food for thought and some really good insights there, Real.
Yeah, I'm sure there's, again, if they follow up questions on that, I'm happy to go down as many rabbit holes as needed from people with questions there. I feel as if I've been talking a whole lot here, Matt, so I'm going to switch it around if you don't mind. How did you get into the ecom game?
It's a long story, I guess, but I'll try and be brief because we're on a podcast after all. But I've been in the world of digital for about 20 years now. My background is a product and PR and marketing guy, basically really strong on brand. Focused in the world of FMCG and product retail. I've always been a product man, right from Dyson through to working with the likes of Brabantio I mentioned and some of the big brands like Wreck-It and Eat Natural. And part of that journey was very much looking at one of my first jobs was to manage national lottery winners, would you believe, as well as launch Starbucks stores and B&Q stores and what have you. And that was a really fun job. Got some really good budgets to do some really interesting and cool things. And what I always struggled with in the world of marketing is understanding that, you pull in one big lever, what's the effect on the consumer? Or how is it informing and persuading a consumer to find, love and buy products, which is what I've always been about throughout my journey. And that's why I ended up in the world of e-commerce with the likes of Brabantio that I mentioned, that be able to understand the changes in performance marketing in the world of digital and content and how that influences people to buy products. And that's really sort of been my sort of a focus throughout my journey. And I think obviously in the world of Amazon, you have a wealth of data, as you know, that we can actually really understand that in detail. So I mean, that's go through that moment. I think it's one sort of story I've mentioned to you before. When I was working on the world of national lottery and national media, and a mum decided that it would be a really good idea to let everyone know on Facebook that she'd won £1 million on a scratch card. And that I was just in awe at how Facebook just blew up this story from no one knowing about it in the Southwest to national media all sitting outside this woman's house. Wow. Wall-to-wall coverage. And I started to see, well, actually, that's the world of digital marketing is definitely something, because at the time, a lot of established brands were just not really taking it seriously. Yeah. That's something for, the next generation, Gen Z, millennials, whatever we want to call it back then. But actually, I was like, hang on a minute, this is super powerful. And I had that sort of second moment again as well with Amazon and Brabantio and optimizing the content and blowing up the first campaign in laundry and generating £250,000 in sales. And I'm just like, whoa, just after a few months' work.
It's an amazing feeling, right? When it comes together.
It's buds. It's something that, I think that's what keeps us all engaged with e-commerce.
Cool. So shifting the lens a little bit here, what's the biggest struggle clients come to you with at the moment, right? I mean, e-com has gone through quite a big change over the last few years, whether it's the sort of COVID wave and the hangover, all those sort of things. The conversation seems to have changed quite a lot from growth to profitability, all those sort of things. But yeah, just curious, you having all those sort of client conversations there, what are the biggest struggles?
Yeah, I think back in the world of COVID, struggles was frankly stock and logistics and supply chain. But now that's obviously blown up a number of costs. I mean, I know container prices, for example, have dropped from $20,000 back down to normality, $1,500 to $2,500, as you depending on who you listen to. So those costs have come down, but energy is still very high. Amazon's squeezing the margin on FBA prices, for example. That's another issue. So it's very much about margin is the biggest struggle that brands have to run on Amazon. And the constant asks from vendor managers for around terms and or funding and or advertising. Brands feel a little bit overwhelmed about, okay, well, where is the right investment? How long should I stay on this channel and accept to be running at a loss? You mentioned the world of supplements. I mean, to break into these really competitive markets, you've got to, at best, break even, haven't you? How long do we do that? How can I make it profitable long term? How can I make Amazon, eBay, or any other channel a viable long term revenue stream for a business? I think that's the biggest thing they're struggling with.
And then I guess, what are the main themes in terms of your recommendations to them? Are there certain areas that you typically focus on early on?
Well, I think it's just around like the Opti profit model that we run. Our approach really is looking at where are the gaps for selection of new products that we can actually introduce. Which products within that range are the most profitable? So you have to really make mistakes on paper, as I would say to sort of clients, is that let's look at the range, the margins. Can we look at remodeling bundles and or gifting and or other product size pack sizes? Definitely in the world of grocery, for example, to make the margins work out. And then how can we double down on those products? Which ones have the lifetime value and the lifetime profit? Okay, well, that's another tactic of, okay, well, we need to think about driving organic growth on those products versus others, passively promote others that perhaps haven't got the margin. And so focusing on driving organic rank and lifetime value for those products with the largest margin, essentially. And it sounds easy, but it is complicated, as you know. But that's basically what I'd give them as tips: is focus on where the profit is, look at the lifetime value of those products. But I mean, we have riffs about certain products are great at introducing new to brand, and probably an entry level that probably aren't as profitable. Yeah. So how does that fit into your strategy? So you're having a coherent strategy, visibility of your numbers across the whole supply chain is super important.
Yeah, certainly easier said than done. But I get the sense as well that this is very much in a sort of individual SKU or ASIN level analysis, right? It's not, it has to go down to that level to sort of pick out.
Yeah. If you're running a shop level, as it were, then you're going to struggle to understand how the various products in the range, when do they fit into the customer journey and the adoption cycle. It's really it has to.
I think there are quite a few recent examples, even sort of on the nozzle side, where you do the sort of LTV by ASIN, and you'd map that to the amount of investment that ASIN currently gets, right, within the form of coupons, discounts, or advertising and all that. And I mean, you'd be really surprised that the mapping is a little bit all over the place. I mean, you could, a lot of the time, interestingly, the hero ASINs are kind of under invested in, right? And they kind of like, people would like to split off budgets to go with other things. I mean, like, relative to sort of everything else, you could argue that it needs more investment here. And so, but also, conversely as well, some of the maybe mid-tier ASINs are over-invested in, and we would make recommendations to go to maybe some of the newer launches and things like that. They're just, you would think they're a gateway product or something like that, but they're actually not. A lot of those sort of scenarios too. Yeah,
I think when we get Rob, our director, paid on the podcast, so we can really look into that. How do we look at ad spend that we're potentially over investing on a SKU? Can we turn off branded search on that product, for example, and boost that margin? He's got some really nice, we call them ad labs experiments within the team of being able to test and learn about how we can fettle the budget, so to speak, to increase margin.
Nice.
Which is really good.
I like the way you brought up experiments there, because actually my next question is very much along these lines, which is, what are the sort of experiment budgets, let's say, from clients? Where are they going? Is it into different channels, or is it into certain ad products within the Amazon? I mean, how are those conversations and budgets being allocated?
Yeah, I think just building on like the building a profit is like rank driving for certain keywords, strategic keywords, definitely in really competitive markets like supplements and vitamins, for example. To give you an idea that in the world of magnesium supplements, if you can get that right, then you're going to be driving £250,000 a month in sales in the UK. So that's an important experiment. But so that's one area, and also different ad types. there's been a lot of new functions within the Amazon advertising console for sponsored display and sponsored display video. For example, how can we get the most out of that from awareness raising and or remarketing? And then expanding out the work in demand side platform, DSP, where there's a lot of budgets going, particularly in the world of video. So Amazon is really pushing that for Prime Video to premium spots, £32 cost per million, sort of give you an idea. So it's quite expensive, but premium. And also, when people are engaged with Clarkson's Farm, they're not going anywhere. You've got a really captive audience. So I think there's some experiment there.
And outside of the Amazon world, I mean, TikTok Shop and things like that, or there's definitely a playbook from retailers to open up marketplaces, right? So I know you've been spending quite a lot of time investigating that whole channel.
Yes, I was interviewed by a national newspaper day, on Friday. But hopefully that comes out about marketplaces overall, and definitely there is a huge trend for retailers to expand their digital shelf. Within going back my old retail head on, is that the bricks and mortar stores have been rationalizing the range of products. So you have a 20-25 products in your range as a brand, but you're very lucky to get one or two listed in with the likes of Tesco's, for example. But now they've launched their own Tesco's marketplace, and the case of B&Q is the same, and the Superdrug, and there's Debenhams. There's definitely a trend there where brands are actually thinking. I think what's Tesco's have been very open in saying actually they want to be number 2 in the UK, and I think that's realistic. And anyone who remembers Rakuten a few years back, the Japanese marketplace that tried to take on Amazon in the UK, knows that you better have big budgets and the big boy boots on if you're going to do that. But I think it's realistic for the reason that a brand and good quality consumer brands want to associate their brands with marketplaces and retail brands which reflect that. So, the other marketplaces like the OnBuys of this world, which are great, they have their place. Yeah. But, if you're a big premium brand, where are you going to live? Where are you going to focus your budget, your time? And it's going to be more on the premium retailers. And a lot of brands are very open, going, actually, well, this is data that we can take to the buyers of these retailers and go, look, you said you weren't going to list these other products, but they're going fantastically well on this marketplace. So I think that's what brands are thinking at the moment. So definitely that's one area that they're pushing.
Yeah, and it's pretty recent, I guess, where there's been talk for maybe a number of years around Tesco marketplaces, or just sort of marketplaces in general, at least here in the UK. But they all seem to be launching roughly at the same time, which is quite interesting, probably coordinated. Cool. So before wrapping up, we'll be finishing every episode of eCom Insights with a recommendation on how to stay curious. So this is something that we do within Optimizon as well, but thought of extending that out to this podcast. So Matt, what's piqued your curiosity lately?
What's piqued my curiosity is mobile ready hero images. What are they? I can hear the listeners say. Basically, if you think about one of the most important steps for a brand is the customer journey and the first click within the world of search. So if you're searching for your product, how does your brand stand out on the digital shelf and grab that share of attention, as we call it internally, on that digital shelf? Well, it's going to be one of two things: the main image and the title. And hopefully the title's mobile optimized, but let's focus on the images. So mobile ready hero images were developed in conjunction with Unilever and Cambridge University. Some great sort of interesting analysis, which have a Google, you'd be able to build into it. But looking at the visibility test of these main images and actually being able to see what's in the pack, what's the key USP, how many are in the pack, etc. And as an agency, I've developed these for the likes of Dettol, Durex, Eat Natural, other brands, Bassett's multivitamins, and they do really increase the click-through rate, and that's really important for listeners, obviously, because that's the first step of the journey. No click, no sale, basically. So that's really, really important. Yeah. So this do check out on my LinkedIn page. I've got the post. It's pinned on there, giving you a bit more detail about mobile ready hero images. But no, to give you an idea, the likes of Magnum increased their sales by 28%.
Wow.
Just on mobile ready hero images, because that's what they were testing at the time, obviously. So it's super important. Can be applied to world of Amazon, Ocado, all the other marketplaces you mentioned. It's the same principle. Some marketplaces have restrictions versus others. Amazon's quite strict on how to use them, but essentially anything on pack, writing wise, you can adapt to strip back and make it a little bit more clearer. But also be thinking about contrast as well. And then think it's really important if you think about the world of mobile, people with poor sight like myself, these products have to really stand out on the digital shelf there, because that's where the majority of the sales are being made. So yeah, mobile ready hero images. It sounds like quite a simple concept, but it's quite in depth. Do check it out. And these marginal gains can make a big difference in the world of big traffic.
Yeah, it's funny. I think of my parents whenever they're looking at their mobile phone. They're always, the default action is to zoom in on things.
Yes.
I
have a friend
increasingly me too, but yes.
Yeah, I have a friend. We all got them. Yeah, we are at that age that they start where the eyesight is going, and they've got these huge. You look at their text, and there's literally I can read my mate's text across the pub. So,
that's right.
because he's
it's
got the
largest option in the settings. Yeah,
basically. So yeah, you get the idea. So applying that approach to the main image, yeah, can make a big difference.
I think, like from my side, you've got to be pretty serious about investing in the Amazon Marketing Cloud if you're sort of on the advertising or the intersection of the advertising and the retail side. So the Amazon Marketing Cloud, I'm sure we'll have lots of future episodes on this, but it's very much concerned about, you can do lots of things around custom ad attribution models. And it's quite illuminating to me if you just change it from last touch attribution to even something quite simple, like just equally weighted. So that is to say, if someone first sees a sponsored brand ad and a few days later they go see DSP and then convert via a third ad 10 days later, sponsored products, let's say, instead of sponsored products getting 100% of the credit, because that's the last thing they saw, the last touch attribution, let's just split it a third each way. And how that just fundamentally changes the numbers, and how you think about how you want to spend or split the budget across all the different ad products. So just that, and playing with custom attribution windows. So instead of just a 14-day attribution, if there's good evidence to say that actually mine's a high price product, it's less impulsive, you want to push that out to say 30 days instead of the default 14, because we kind of see that on other channels possibly. Again, just changes the picture entirely. So small things like that. We've all just sort of grown up with the defaults around 7 or 14 days, and sort of last touch attribution. So really interesting discussions. And then you put that back to sort of customers to say, well, if we do it this way, this is what the picture looks like. It actually looks pretty different. So that's kind of what we're playing around with at the moment.
Well, there's a couple of questions I have. Amazon Marketing Cloud and the idea of a clean room,
yes,
and cookies. For those who are probably not as technically minded, why is AMC so important in the context of cookies on the web?
Well, the short story is, cookies are pretty much on their way out, and it's pretty much benefited those companies that have access to what's called first party data. So, Amazon has access to my information, because when I buy something, they have to know my name and address and to ship things and all that sort of stuff, and therefore that's a legitimate use case, and you're not sharing it with anybody. And what that allows you to do is to say, okay, if we provide this environment where, let's say, you want to upload Shopify datasets or any other sort of datasets, we can do a match between let's say the Shopify and the Amazon datasets, and give you insights on that, right? How many sort of cross-channel customers there were, things like that. So a clean room is basically an environment where a privacy-first environment where you can gain insights without leaking to third parties or anything like that, right? It's built on Amazon's infrastructure, the Amazon Web Services, AWS, and so and they're never going to sort of share that data, all that kind of stuff. But it does allow multiple parties to come together to share data sets, do some sort of match or analysis in the background, and give you aggregated results, right? They're obviously not going to say, Matt Anderson is the one that bought 3 times from each channel, all that sort of stuff. But they can say 10% of the audience did that, or those sorts of level of insights.
You were quite coy with a really valuable piece of information there about being able to overlay different data sets from different channels, and I think that's really interesting. Going back to the point of am I, and we all get it, don't we, when we're working with clients and going, actually, well, you should invest more in Amazon, and the usual pushback is, well, we're investing an awful lot in our Shopify site at the moment. We don't want to take the clients away from Amazon to Shopify, but actually, is that the right strategy?
Yeah. So this area of overlap between D2C and Amazon is interesting. At Nozzle, we've done probably about 10 types for 10 customers. We've done the analysis of what does that overlap look like, and we've looked at, like, are they an Amazon native brand that is a few years after operating on Amazon, you then open up a D2C, and so it's not a major part of your business, the D2C. It's, I don't know, 10-20%, and you're looking to grow it. Or what about the other way around? I'm a D2C native brand that is now selling on Amazon. What's typically happening? And so in almost all cases, I'm always asking the customer, what do you expect the overlap to be? Like, what do you actually think it will be? And it's always order of magnitude higher than what it actually is, right? It comes out at 20-30% or something like that. And we've a lot of the time it's honestly single digits, right? It's like 7-9%, something like that. And it matters whether it's what direction is it? Is it Amazon D2C, or are they going D2C to Amazon? In most cases, you're probably not happy going from D2C to Amazon. You're kind of bleeding customers, so to speak, versus Amazon to D2C is kind of the holy grail. But then you can't really influence that, right? It's obviously you run into terms of service issues amongst other things. Really hard to execute on that. So it's kind of happening organically. But I mean, so the overlap is not typically that high. And from our point of view as Nozzle, it's always interesting to say, like, okay, well, how do we adjust the lifetime value or the customer acquisition cost if there is a material overlap? Because you might have a lifetime value for your D2C, but actually, if you include what happens to those customers who start on D2C and go to Amazon, that's going to change your LTV calculation, and the other way around, of course. So, we run through scenarios of what that typically means, and does it make a material difference to any of the LTV and customer acquisition type stuff that we do there. But yeah, it's interesting that it's really not as much as people think. And the tricky part for D2C native brands is it's especially where D2C is right now, which is not in a particularly good place. They're certainly struggling. The Amazon channel's growing a lot quicker. So now you've got a D2C native brand that's the Amazon channel might not be as big as D2C, but it's certainly growing a lot quicker. And so now they have to take Amazon a lot more seriously, but are worried, obviously, of that, of the bleed of D2C customers to Amazon. So a bunch of complex questions. Probably don't have, this is maybe another episode or something. But I think one of the main things for me is, really interesting to do that overlap analysis. And the main takeaway is it's probably less material than you think, but our sample size is still pretty small at about 10.
Yeah, it's worth to subscribe, guys, because in future episodes, we're definitely going to be doing a deep dive on AMC and overlap audiences across channel. It's very much what we're about. So definitely there's some area looking forward to. And we'd love to know what is you, our brand new listeners, would like to hear from this series. We've done a lot of talking, but we really want to hear from you guys on what topics you'd like us to cover. So drop us an email at ecom.insights@optimizon.co.uk, or find myself, Matt Anderson, or Royal Klein out on LinkedIn. Do feel free to connect and message us, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Okay, so until next time, keep being curious and keep thriving in the world of e-commerce, listeners.